Welcome to the 8 Billion Project, where we're on a mission to make an impact by discovering and sharing the purpose of every person on this planet. I'm your host, Liza Florida. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 8 Billion Podcast. I am your host, Liza Florida. And today we've got a special guest, part of Season 5D. She is trained as a neuropsychologist, had a spiritual epiphany in 2013, and became immersed in learning mindfulness and self-compassion. She was so profoundly impacted by what she learned that she ended up retraining in multiple evidence-based mindfulness programs so she could teach mindfulness. Not finding exactly what she wanted, she ended up creating her own mindfulness program for families with neurodiverse children called Mindful Village. She also provides mindfulness life coaching to women with a special emphasis on parenting, spiritual mentoring, joyful living, and high performance. Welcome, Rabia Subhani, to the 8 Billion Podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of this special Season 5D. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, when we connected, this is what I wanted to tell the audience. It has been an absolute incredible, almost unbelievable journey of putting all these guests together, because every time I connected, it was just like, where have you guys been all my life? It's true. It's energy, frequency, and vibration. Sometimes we're on different paths until we're meant to divinely meet. And that's definitely speaks with my, with finding Rabia, or her finding me, or the universe putting us together.
Synchronicity.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Rabia, I gave, of course, your brief bio, but let's dive in. Could you tell us a little bit more about the story of your spiritual awakening and then what got you into your work? Because obviously you're a practicing neuropsychologist, but it's
sure.
now.
Absolutely. So I went through a lot of life changes, as most people who have spiritual awakenings do. In my case, it was a really unexpected divorce. And I have a son with autism, and he did not handle the changes well. So he kind of fell apart during this time. We had multiple moves. He changed schools. Dad was kind of out of the picture. And so all of this combined to give him like a real behavioral issue. Like he was constantly melting down. And so we ended up screaming at each other. And I was a psychologist, and I specialized in autism. So I was like, I felt so much guilt and self-blame that I couldn't find a way to get to him and make him, calm down and not be in so much pain. And ironically, I had actually taught him mindfulness when he was around 4, because he had been having some issues back then. And when I taught him mindfulness, when he started using those techniques, he really got calm and was able to emotionally regulate. So during this time, what happened was he completely forgot everything that he had learned, and he was just melting down. And I thought, if I can't change his behavior, maybe I need to change my reactions to his behavior. And so I went on my own spiritual journey. And as I got into mindfulness, I was on a retreat one day, and I had this minor epiphany that the reason why he hadn't been able to retain what he had learned was because I had not been modeling it for him. I had thought those were his issues, and I need to teach him mindfulness, not I need to be doing it too and modeling it and living it. And so when I had that realization, I was really motivated to learn it for myself so I could teach other parents and other women in particular. So I retrained in a lot of different programs so I could teach it as I became a certified mindfulness meditation teacher with like a 2-year program, because I wanted to be able to offer this to other families. Because up until this point, I'd been doing neuropsychologist mostly testing. Mm-hmm. So I'd been testing children and adults that had issues, and I would give them a diagnosis and say, here are your school recommendations, work recommendations, but a lot of these kids could not really do talk therapy. And even the adults, a lot of adults didn't feel comfortable doing talk therapy. So I was, when I learned about mindfulness, I was like, this is something that everybody across the board can implement and not have to worry about having to talk, or, just being able to emotionally self-regulate by using mindfulness techniques and self-compassion. From that point, I was like, I need to do something so I can teach others how to be able to handle these issues as they come up. So that's what I did. So I ended up, as you mentioned, I created a program that had all these components of mindfulness, positive psychology, self-compassion, and some neuroscience, because that's my background, and just be able to teach families. And then also started doing coaching, like mindfulness-based life coaching for women, to teach them how to navigate, things coming up, how to live a place from soul alignment for those who are still struggling and have not found their path. Along the way, during this journey, I had this remembrance that I was a Sufi. And I remember when it happened because I was watching this, it was a video on Oprah's Super Soul Sundays. Mm-hmm. It was a Sufi mystic. And I started watching that and I was like, there's something about that really called to me. And I'm like, I'm going to go look this guy up. So I looked up and watched a longer video by him. And I just started crying. I had this like out of body experience. And it was like, oh my God, he was saying exactly what was going through my heart and my soul. And it was, I'm a Sufi. And it was like an instant knowing. And that moment changed my life forever, because after that, I was just like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it, because it made I had been so long, I'd been struggling, trying to figure out, do I need a path? Do I have to follow a specific philosophy or spiritual, path, or is it okay? Because I really loved Buddhism. And I was raised as a mainstream Muslim. So I was, which some parts of it called to me, but a lot of it didn't. And when I got into Buddhism, I was like, oh, I'm probably a Buddhist. So I told my mentor, who was a Buddhist nun, and she had converted from Judaism about 30 years ago. And I told her, I was like, I think I'm a Buddhist. And she goes, no, honey, when your soul finds its home, your heart will know. It's not going to be, I think I'm Buddhist. It's going to be, I know I'm this. And so then that's exactly what happened. It was like, I watched that video and I just started crying and had this, really bizarre body experience. And I was like, I knew. So
isn't that really interesting? I mean, here's the thing, and we're raised in so many different religions, so to speak, when we're born, or, based on culture. But this whole process of, and I'm going to talk about this in greater detail, audience, the whole process of remembrance has been so potent for me in just the last 6 weeks, even from when I started pre-podcast interviewing, because it just this level of opening up, because I kept saying to everyone, remember who you are, because we always know in this journey, you're this, you're light beings, you're spiritual beings having a physical experience. So I'm just using it loosely. But then when I came across this whole mastermind group and just a deeper awakening, I was like, wow, remembrance means even the smallest things. Like I would be lighting candles, like just creating like an altar for myself, putting sage. I didn't know that I was probably tapping into one of my past lives and remembering that. And now it made me go back and think, like, what else was I doing from my other, from remembrance, that was mimicking everything that I had done in the past to ultimately bring me to this place today.
Yeah. And maybe that's also why we get deja vu, right?
Yes.
Right. Those are probably things that we're remembering from a past life, it's just somewhere in your DNA, and it just happens to come up and you're like, oh, that feels familiar.
Yes. Or I was even telling people too, life had seemed like a bunch of miracles were happening to me. But they're not. When you truly go down a healing journey, you remove all the programs. It's not, and it doesn't, believe me, audience, it doesn't happen overnight. You can't do one ceremony and you remove all your programs. It is an ongoing thing. But as you start clearing out things like heavier, dense stuff in your field, you start opening up the communication lines, right? And I was just like, and once that happens, you feel like so many miracles are happening, but you're not. You're actually accessing your higher self and infinite potentiality. And that's where things start to and then one day your life is just a complete dream come true,
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to just kind of explain. And I think that, Rabia, we jumped from like your beginnings as a neuropsychologist all the way to like remembrance and all this kind of stuff. But let me go back a little bit, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people will want to know this. When you specialized in autism at the time, did you choose that specialty even before you had your son?
I did. And this is, one of life's synchronicities. I was fascinated with autism. And before I even got into grad school, I went and did a little teacher training in this little preschool with children that had autism. And I was just fascinated by it because it was such an unusual, and this is in the 90s. So autism was not super well known in the 90s. So I trained in because I was just fascinated that there was such a huge spectrum of how it showed up in different children. And so for me, that was like, there was this quality about it that was just mysterious. And then you had the children who were like incredibly intelligent in one area, but they couldn't do simple social skill type things. So it was that dichotomy of, able to do certain things, not able to do certain things. It was just very, I don't know, it was something about it that was really interesting to me. So I specialized in that. I went through grad school, I got married. And then when I had my son, I actually did not catch it for the first couple of years because he had it. I don't like to say high functioning, but he had such a mild presentation of it that he didn't show all of the symptoms that I had been trained in, because I had worked with more severe children. And so he had great eye contact, and he was pretty sociable. He smiled. He loved to hang out with other people. And it was just, I missed it for a while until he started doing some very stereotypical autistic behaviors, like flapping his hands when he got excited, and just little things like that. And then he had a language delay. And so then I picked up on it. But from the beginning, I have been very grateful that I was trained in this. I knew what to do. I wasn't desperately seeking help because I knew exactly what to do with him at home. And I had the resources that I was able to stay at home and raise him and do all of my trainings that I had learned with him to teach him speech and daily living chores and social skills and all that stuff. And also third, that he was not, he could have been much more severe. It could have been a lot worse. He could have had something else. I'm very conscious, especially now since I've been on the spiritual path, to always be in gratitude and abundance in every facet of my life, because that is a place where people get trapped, where they see lack, where there's no lack. They're not in abundance. They see, everything is something that's missing. It's not grateful for what you have and be thankful. And so I've been very conscious about keeping myself in that state of gratitude. No matter what goes wrong, I'm like, it could be worse. And, here's what I have. I have the resources to be able to do this for him. I have the resources for this. I can do this. I can reach out and find help if I need it, because I have connections, because I'm in the mental health care world. And I also tell him, I'm like, he's been my best teacher. I'm like, you have been the best teacher anybody could ever have, right? For spiritual growth, for everything. Anytime I feel smug that I'm starting to learn how to be calm and in a Zen state, he'll push those buttons and like, no, I don't think so, Mom. I don't think so. Let's see how good you're doing.
No, they are. They are greatest teachers. My son is turning 18 in about a month or so. And I grew up being the Sag and the free spirit and all this kind of stuff. I couldn't choose my son choosing the most opposite person to learn from, because he's a Taurus. And so he's more like, okay, I know, Mom, like you're a big idealist, but he goes, there's time when, because you have to make money and all this kind of stuff. So even as much as I'm in a deep spiritual journey, one of the things, even just the lessons that I've had in just the last couple of weeks, is I have to surrender to he has his own journey. I keep thinking that as a mother, because I'm highly spiritual, I could do this for my son. But those are one of the things, even in just the journey of parenting, is that you'll realize as much as you want to implement these things to help them, they have their own journey to go through, and they teach us so much,
And that's our own little test, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Robbie, one more thing that I wanted to ask in regards to autism. It's true. Like I grew up, let's say like 80s to 90s. But now that I'm in my like older adult years, I started noticing this. And I was even saying it to my other girlfriends. I said, autism wasn't even there when we were growing up. You know what I mean? So could you help provide, I'm pretty sure you've done an immense research on this. Do you know why autism and like how it's come up in just more of the recent years? Or is it something that we try to, brush aside and dust underneath?
I think it's a combination of things. It's always been around. It's been around for a very long time, but I think the people who got diagnosed were the ones that were very severe. the ones who were nonverbal or rocking and hitting their head. And so those were the people that were really diagnosed like before the 80s or so. In the 80s and 90s, it started getting much more prevalent because there was a bigger knowledge. Like people knew about it. They were teaching doctors, pediatricians to look for. And as the years have gone by, it's become even more and more prevalent in that the dissemination of information, like getting pediatricians to do well child checklists that include autism features when they're toddlers. And 10 years ago, this was unheard of. You didn't get diagnosed till you were maybe in your elementary school. Teachers noticed something.
Correct.
But now they're trying to get earlier and earlier identification by involving pediatricians, involving speech therapists, and people who tend to see these children the earliest. So it's a combination of people becoming more aware of it, like better diagnostic tests, becoming more aware of, like, the latest thing now is for girls and women who often get misdiagnosed or just completely skipped until they're either in their 20s or 30s or 40s. A lot of I do adult autism assessment. Yeah. And a lot of these and I specialize in women. So a lot of women who come to me they always knew there was something different. And they felt like one of the things that keeps coming up is they feel like they have to act in social situations. So they're like, it's so exhausting because I have to realize, where do my arms need to go? What do I need to say if somebody says this? Am I looking at them in the eye? Am I remembering to do that? So it's a very similar pattern, but they've been misdiagnosed because women tend to fit in easier in school, especially.
Yeah. I would say that too. And I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, or this could just be an observation of mine, like by ethnicity, I'm Filipino. I was raised by Filipino parents, and sometimes they don't even see that, like these little things to pay attention to.
Right.
When you're first generation here, or you're just having to raise a family, oftentimes it's about survival. Could we make the mortgage and all that?
Yes. Yes.
A lot of the things, like I remember having asthma attacks, and they're like, you're fine. Nothing to say anything like my parents treated me bad, but right. Sometimes we talk about that, like in my generation, in our culture, like our parents would just be like, you're fine, don't worry.
Right. Suck it up. Right.
Yeah, suck it up. But you got this. This is like this all the time in the Philippines.
Right. Yeah. I heard that one a lot. Oh, people would just, they deal with that all the time. That's not a big deal. And we lived through the smallpox. What are you talking about?
I know, exactly, right? We used to walk in the snow. Like, no one walks in the snow. But yeah, okay, so now fast forward, because here's the thing with neuropsychology, that's very much, and like I said, I'm learning from this podcast as well. And then you going into spirituality. How does that work with the balancing of Western medicine and something very holistic?
I'm excited to talk about that because when I first went into this field, it was very cut and dried, very science, very medical, very black and white, right? Yeah. But over the last 15 years, there has been a huge shift in people who are doing research based on neuroscience. So they're doing the research, the scientific background of meditations, the scientific background of the vagus nerve activation, right? With the deep breathing in I forgot what it's called, pranayama, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? Yeah. So the deep breathing that they practice in Eastern philosophies and in, all of these spiritual type practices. Well, now there's, not now, I guess it's been several years now, but they've shown that when you do deep breathing, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which brings your stress level down. It calms you down. It slows your heartbeat. So all of these things have a basis, which was not really understood. And, they were scoffed at. Even mindfulness 30 years ago was laughed at. It was not considered anything typical or anything to be used for medical purposes. But with John Kabat-Zinn, who basically brought mindfulness into Western medicine, he started doing so much research around 30 years ago that he was able to show that mindfulness it decreased depression, anxiety, it helped with chronic pain. And there were so many research findings that came out of his work over the past 30 years. And he was at Harvard. So, they took that seriously. So in a large part because of his work, mindfulness is now mainstream. And one of his, the program he founded, MBSR, is in use all over the country now, all over the world now.
And so now you use of course, you use the Western practice of of neuropsychology, and you merge it with the holistic teachings.
Exactly. And you can use, so what I do is I use my background to bring in pieces when I'm teaching, because I do mostly like mindfulness teaching now.
Yeah.
I do still do neuropsychology because I do assessments and stuff. But when I'm doing teaching with my clients, I like to bring in some neuroscience and say, like one of my favorite research studies that I like to use is that there was this study with this monk in France, I believe. His name is Mathieu Ricard. They showed that if you compare meditators who are experienced like he was, because he was a monk and meditating for years, with new meditators, and they put them in MRI machines. Mm-hmm. And so when they were inside the MRI machines, they started making lots of distracting sounds. They were like cymbals and jumping and shouting, or believe me or not, when they did Mathieu Ricard's MRI, he had no brain changes. He was so experienced at meditating that he could completely tune out all of the distractors, and he stayed in that calm, tranquil state the whole time they were doing all these bizarre sounds. Of course, the newbie meditators their brains were going all over the place because they were responding to the sounds. So all of that to show that now they can show scientifically that when you do meditate. Oh, and the other thing was they found that you were producing, not the same study, but they found it through another study that when you meditate, you produce a chemical substance through your pineal gland, which is right where they call the third eye, that repairs cell damage. So, and these things are now coming out, which, 20, 30 years ago, we had no clue. And we're like, oh, yeah, meditation, whatever. And now they're like, no, actually, you're repairing cell damage and you can keep your calm state while people around you, like kids are screaming. If you're a mom and you're used to meditating, you can tune out your kids and still keep your blood pressure down, keep your stress level down. So it's fascinating what's coming out.
It's interesting you talk about that though, Rabia, because for the last 2 to 3 years, I've had a meditation coach, but I don't know if I mentioned this in our other meeting, but mine has always been like really like astral projections. It got really creative, and that helped me still open up my crown chakra. However, in the more recent times, even attending some of the seminars that I have, we went into deep breathing. And I was doing an exercise at that conference and I was like, whoa, where did this all come from? Because I could feel it. I could feel the sensation all over my third eye was opening. And I was just like, how come I've never done this modality before or this version? But it's really powerful because you can almost instantly, if you start practicing those breathing exercises, just take yourself into a different conscious state of awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that's what I was just going to say. I know that it takes a while, like, a big part of my healing journey was energy healing, right? But there's, like I said, there's so many things, like there's ADHD, there's autism, there's so many different things. Some people are going to be like, oh, well, are you sure you can heal it? So it is a process of unfolding to see what works for you. But Rabia, you've got a great practice going on. And just to clarify with the audience, when you say your practice is mindfulness village, right? You're talking about the conscious awareness of being able to identify, of course, like autism and go about it in a mindful manner.
So it's two different things. I do mindfulness coaching.
Okay.
Which is one-on-one. It's with adults. And I have a program called Mindful Village. And the program teaches parents how to use mindfulness to help their children regulate themselves and also for themselves. So for the parents and things they can teach their children. But it's about teaching the parents about self-compassion, not feeling guilty about their parenting skills, and then showing that compassion for their children, compassionate parenting. It teaches them about how to help their children emotionally regulate and how the parents can help themselves regulate.
Right.
There's a lot of stressful interactions when you have children that have neurodiverse challenges. And it's, and then giving them hope for the future. So having some positive, joyful living type techniques to help them not just survive, but thrive, but get happy, to look forward to the next day. Get down and play with your children. that's the best form of mindfulness, is being with your children and playing in the moment and not thinking about the past and the future. So I teach them the basics of mindfulness, and then I teach them, well, once you've got those down and you're doing the practices, what next? Next is you start thinking about gratitude. You start thinking about flourishing, how to live joyfully from day to day and not be mired in the challenges of neurodiverse parenting. So that's what it is. The program is like, it's an 8-week secular program that teaches them these techniques and how to, use those to incorporate into their daily living. And so that they're happy and they're not, because when I compare myself now to where I was like 15 years ago, I was miserable, right? I just gone through a divorce. I was like overwhelmed. I was single parenting, and there's a high rate of single parenting among neurodiverse parents because parents, a lot of spouses just can't, the marriages don't last because the children's issues are too much for them to overcome. And so I was miserable. I was single parenting. I was screaming at my kid all the time. Mm-hmm. And also guilt and self-blame, low self-worth because I'd gone through a divorce. And so there were a lot of my own issues that I needed to work through. But sometimes when you're in that vicious cycle of you have to put the kids first and you have to take care of them because you have to, you don't have a choice when the child has extra issues as well. Yeah. And so what do? You need to learn how to take care of yourself. I love to use the oxygen mask analogy. If you got to put your mask on first, like in the plane. Yeah. Before you can, right?
Before you can help other people.
Exactly. Yeah. And parents forget that, especially parents of neurodiverse children. They're just struggling and they're just surviving. And they forget all the things that they need to do to take care of themselves and make sure I'm like, you're not going to be able to take care of your child if you don't take care of yourself. Yeah. And you're functioning at half the level what you're supposed to be. So it's super important for parents to learn how to take care of themselves and let go of that blame. And, I teach them affirmations and just things like mirror work and, all the stuff that I picked up in my spiritual journey.
And on your spiritual journey, this has been like I told you, this has been an absolute beautiful journey for me to even record season 5D, only because I even just remember going through the divorce. My son was less than 1, or just like 1 to 3 years old as I was going through all of that. And he didn't have autism, but everything seemed overwhelming on top of my own personal issues of what I was dealing with going through the divorce.
Right.
So I think it's absolutely commendable to you, most especially, to create these programs, the 8-week, right? And then I'm assuming from there, they'll jump into coaching if they feel that there's a need to have you on a regular basis to coach them through this process. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's like you came here knowing what was going to happen. You know what I mean? That's the beauty. And then we get to the best part, which is the spiritual journey, because that's where you and I heavily talked about it.
Yeah.
Just the unraveling of it all. And going back maybe about 15 minutes ago to what you were talking about, how we seem to be like, there's so much different religions or practices and spirituality out there, right? I at one point too thought, I love Buddhism, right? And I would go visit China and go to the Buddha and do my offering. But when you came across that teacher and she said, "Oh no, Rabia, you'll know," right?
She was so sure because she used to be Jewish. And she found that when she went to a Buddhist class, she had the same experience. She just started crying and it was like an inner knowing. It was like 100% gut knowing. And she said, I know you. You're not going to be one of those, I think I am. I think you're going to know. You just haven't found it yet. And the funny thing is that so in Sufism, it's all about love. And we call the divine our beloved. So our goal in life is to be reunited with our beloved. And so we do, so Sufis achieve this oneness with the divine through different methods. It can be through art. It can be through whirling, like whirling dervishes. Through poetry, like Rumi. It can be through music. So there are certain musicians who, when they sing, all of their songs are sung to the divine. And so when they sing, sometimes they can sing in certain syllables and they keep repeating the syllable and it sends you into a trance. Wow. And you're kind of like in the flow. And so I used to listen to a very famous Sufi singer in the 90s, and I would go into these trances. And so I told my parents at the time, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm Sufi. And they're like, no, you're mainstream. You just think that, just because you like the singer. And I was like, oh, okay, you must be right. So I let it go. So when I started my spiritual path and I was searching, still, I loved Buddhism because I loved meditating. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I'm like, I think this is it. But some of the things didn't really resonate. And then when I listened to this guy, his name is Llewellyn Von Lee, by the way, in case any of your readers are interested. Your listeners. He was part of the silent Sufis and they meditate. And when he said that, I was like, oh, that's what I am. I'm a silent Sufi because I like to meditate, but I sing God's praises in my heart. Like you focus on the heart and you flood it with love and and the Sufi meditation, one of the main Sufi meditations is that you focus on a piece of joy in your heart. And then anytime a thought comes to mind, you flood it with emotion, with love until you have no sensation in your body, no feeling except love. And you're overflowing with love, and that you're not thinking anymore. You're just feeling love.
And you just are love.
You are love. Exactly. And so that one spoke to me so strongly. And I did. And, of course, then after I realized I was Sufi, I started looking at the different orders because they all have their own practices and they all have different ways of achieving that oneness with God. And, if you choose to follow a guide, you want to do it on your own. And so anyway, it's been a journey. I think the main piece was just knowing that I was a Sufi. It was like a wholehearted, whole soul gut knowing. It was just like, I'm a Sufi. I've always been a Sufi. I just had forgotten for a while.
Right. It's, that you know that you know, and it's all of us it's taking each of our individual journeys to go home, because at the very core, we are love and we are all one. That has been the driving mission of 8 billion, most especially for season 5. And it's so beautiful, the Sufi practice, because art imitates life. It's like your life is the art form in whatever skill set and gift that you have to give to the world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's been a lovely journey. It's been life-changing, honestly. And I even someday I may thank my ex for setting me on this path, because I don't know that I think I would have eventually remembered, but it might have been 20 years down the line. I don't know. So I think he started me on it faster. But
I was just having the previous podcast that I was just like, I've had this pattern of relationships like 17 years, right? And I was just like, but it's okay. At the end, it led me here. And this is the greatest gift of all. Like,
exactly.
Because there were parts of me like, could I have figured this out in half the time? Like not 17 years, maybe like 10. And I look back and there's just no, like it all led from one thing to the next.
It unfolds in divine timing, and we just have to be patient. But when you get there, it's not, you don't even think about how long it took to get there. You're just so happy you're there.
You're there because it's timeless.
Yes.
It does become timeless. And I wanted to share this with the audience. I'm pretty sure that if you on this for anything that has interested you in this podcast, and of course this specific season, as you have an understanding that we are all spiritual beings having a physical experience. And that time, they say, there's been sayings that time is just an illusion. And it's a gauge for us as human beings in these human bodies that, allowed us to measure things. But when you really truly get to this most spiritual part in your connection with the divine, there is no time. And so therefore, what might have seemed like miracles are really you pulling from this, this time-space continuum that doesn't exist. You're just pulling infinite possibilities.
The quantum field. Right.
The quantum field of infinite possibility. Yeah. And so at least for Rabia and myself, since we've been down that and we honor wherever you are on your journey, we're both here in service to you guys, and her specifically because she's got a specialty. So
what are you doing? Look at how many people you're reaching with your amazing podcast.
This is what I want to tell you. So yours is Sufi, right? I was like, well, what's mine? And, I'm going to go out on a limb and talk about it. For me, I had always been attracted to the solar system, the stars, and the cosmos. And it was around this time last year that I came across someone who was talking so much about the star seeds. right?
Yeah.
And I was like, no wonder I used to go to sleep and just watch the planets. And I could watch the History Channel all the time and just watch planets float without listening to the audio. Some people say, okay, of course, that's the alien race. And yeah, maybe if it is the alien race or anything like that, it's to each of us to define. But I do believe that there's a whole, not only just this Earth and planet, there's a whole multiverse and trillions of galaxies out there for us to. Yeah. And this is Earth school.
Right. I've actually been told I'm a starseed too. So
I know it's amazing. If I could share with the audience and with you, Rabia, I believe we are all from the star system. Maybe it just takes a process of remembering that we all belong to this one field of like just being one. We came here in these different vessels just to learn, like, how would you know what good is if you didn't know what bad is? And again, that's like, all relative, how would you know what happy is if you didn't know what sad felt like? Right. And so these are the journeys that we all take in order to discover ourselves. And Rabia, I commend you so much for going down that journey. Now, is there anything, of course, I know we covered so much and this has been an absolutely amazing podcast. Is there anything that you absolutely, you wanted to share? And it can be from any facet of either your practice, your spiritual practice,
I think the one thing I want to share is something that I learned from my business mentor a couple of months ago, and it really just stood out to me. And she said that when you are in that state of bliss and complete joy, and you're having like the perfect moment, you are at the best energetic match for the universe or the divine. So she said, when you're in that moment, that is the time that you reach out, and she calls it tickling the universe and saying, you know what, it would be so great if whatever it is you want. And you just put it out into the universe and you let it go. You lose, you don't get attached to it. You don't keep coming back to it, because then you're pulling yourself back into the 3D level if you're attached to the outcome or anything. But she said, when you're in a state of bliss and you're completely happy, you're having the perfect moment, you're eating the perfect food, or you're with your family and you're so happy, that's the time when you are the best match for the universe. So she said that those are the times when you should be reaching out and saying, it would be great if I could, have a child, or if I could be able to travel, or whatever it is you want in life, be able to support, like if you want to start a charitable organization, whatever it is you want, just put it out into the universe, but then just let it go. Yes. So I just thought that was really interesting, because she's right. When you're perfectly happy and you're in a state of love and joy, that is what the universe is. That's what the divine is. And so you're resonating the highest at that point.
No, you're absolutely right. And you reminded me of a story. I was going at the beginning. So this was maybe about 3 years ago, and I was going through such major heartbreak from relationship patterns. And I came across, a reader from the UK, and I waited a while to get to her. And she goes, I want to say thank you, though. She actually said, it's an honor to be in this space with you. She goes, because of what you're going to be doing. And I said, do you know something I don't know? And then she was all like, of course I know something you don't know.
Wow.
But she said to me, you are exactly where you're supposed to be in your journey. And she goes, keep going, because she goes, I promise you, you will have these blissful moments where you're crying because you absolutely know your highest truth. And every time I cry in those blissful moments, I think of that story, and this reminded me of it. You're in these blissful states, like crying because you're so happy, you know the highest truth.
Yeah.
And there's tears of joy.
Exactly. And that's funny you said that, because I was actually going to say that next, that there was, Humans of New York.
Which one?
Humans of New York, the Brandon Stanton series where he does interviews with people in New York and different parts of the world.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Oh, you're going to love that. Go to Facebook and look it up. Humans of New York. So he does this little, he was a photographer who started out, I think he lost his job or something. And he started out just taking pictures of random people on the streets of New York. And then he started asking them about themselves. So they became this whole series where he does a little story about each person he meets. And he ended up traveling and doing them in different countries, but they're super popular and they're beautiful human interest love stories. And one of the times that he did it with this guy who told him that he was spiritually awakened. And he said, I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm just telling you that one day I was on my balcony and I was listening to my Walkman, and I suddenly realized that I was not my thoughts. And I woke up, and he said, but the one thing I will tell you is that everybody is exactly where they're meant to be. And so many people who, are awake in the interview or whatever, they say the same thing. So just to reaffirm what you said with your story for your listeners, to not be, because a lot of people get really hung up on, oh my gosh, how do I wake up and what can I do? But that attachment to outcome holds you back. So, right, not getting hung up on wanting to do it, but just surrendering and coming back, surrendering, coming back.
It is constant surrender. Yeah, I'm going to tell the audience this, even producing season 5D was constant surrender, because it's like, I have these big expanded views and I want to do this, and there's 8 billion people to do this for. And it's like, whoa, slow down, little Lisa, because, lots of things all have to take shape, because there's so many different lives. And so, you know what I mean? So it's constant surrender. And Rabia was right. You cannot say too much to like, oh, this endpoint when I'm healed and I don't feel the pain anymore, because for that brief moment, maybe you're meant to feel the pain. So then you could get to your next step.
Yeah. You're doing the shadow work. And that's part
absolutely. Sometimes
part of the process.
Shadow work will stay with you. But I'm telling you, there are people like myself and Rabia and the rest of the cast. Why was I saying the cast? But the rest of the guests for season 5, this is going to be an amazing, incredible season for all of you to pull from that, because at the basis of everything, everyone is here to spread love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, Dr. Rabia, thank you so much. If anyone would love to look more into your work, where could they find you?
drrabia.com. So drrabia.com. Thank you.
Rabia.
And thank you so much for having me. This has been like one of the loveliest interviews I've done, because it was a beautiful conversation of spirituality, and you can't get any better than that.
No, it has been truly my pleasure. And I would love to, I know with my season 5 guests, I know I'm going to be in touch with them for so many, from this lifetime and on.
These are soul connections. You're absolutely right.
These are soul connections. We're here to be of service to all of you guys. So thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of 8 Billion Podcast. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the 8 Billion Podcast. If it's moved you in any way, please share your thoughts or give us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. To listen to more episodes, go to 8billionpodcast.com, or to learn more about our mission, go to 8billionproject.com.